Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. As Jamie mentioned, just a quick note that the meeting is being recorded. I'm excited to have the opportunity today to showcase the mapping tools available on the All Things Missouri website, specifically the new map room. For those of you who are new to All Things Missouri, it's an interactive website with no-cost mapping and reporting tools to give you access to a broad selection of data that provides an insight into the lives and communities of everyday Missourians. So for those who don't know how to navigate there, it's at allthingsmissouri.org, as you see here. Also, just for example, you can Google All Things Missouri, and it's the first thing that comes up in a Google search. So once you're there at the site, you'll notice that at the top, you have options to look at maps, reports, tools, and resources. For our purposes today, we'll be clicking on Maps, which will take us to the center of the page, and we have some options here as well. So we have a map gallery with some pre-made maps that are of interest to a lot of folks and that hit kind of some of the focus areas for MU extension. There's also the old Missouri map room, which will be sunsetted shortly, and then the new Missouri map room, which we'll be diving into today. So I'll click on New Missouri Map Room. And for those who have used the old map room, the look and feel is somewhat similar, just things are kind of in a different place. And as Jamie mentioned, it still holds all 30,000 data layers. So these data come from national secondary sources like the American Community Survey, from the US Census Bureau, the CDC, HRSA, HUD, and many more. And so let's dive in. Right now, you'll see on the screen on the left-hand side, there's a Find Data pane that's open, and that can be opened or collapsed by clicking the Add Data tile on the left-hand side here. And for those who are old map room users, you'll notice that there are two additional ways to add data. There's a recently added data section here, which is recently added layers from our All Things Missouri map team, and then most used data, which is going to give you mapping layers that are most commonly used by our users right now. There's also the ability to browse by topic. So for example, say I wanted to add layers to my map about educational attainment. I could click Browse by Topic. And here I'm going to see a number of categories. And in this category tree to the left of education, there's a little triangle-shaped caret. I can click that, and it'll expand to subcategories. And I can click on attainment, and then I can click on all students. And the deeper I explore, the more granular I get, it'll take me to the layers that are relevant to those topics. So here you'll see a whole bunch of map layers related to educational attainment for all students. As you can see, it's mostly from the American Community Survey, which is from the US Census, and it includes historical data as well. So we maintain the most current layer, which is 2018 to 2022, but then also layers that precede that. So this way we can make historical comparisons. So let's say I didn't want to browse by topic, I wanted to browse by source. I can click on the Browse by Topic button again to click off, and then I can click Browse by Source. And for example, let's say I was interested in looking at broadband data. I could look at data from the FCC. So I would scroll down my list of sources here until I encountered FCC fabric data here. And again, I could click on the little caret to the left to expand those categories. And as you can see, once again, it provides a number of different data layers for the map related to broadband from the FCC, and with the most recent towards the top here from 2023. In addition to browse by topic and browse by source, one of the more popular ways to search for information or search for layers for maps is to search by keyword. And as you noticed, I just clicked off of browse by source by re-clicking the button. I can click on the search field for search by keyword. And with our search, it helps to use one word or two words. A lot of times if folks use a longer phrase or a sentence, the search results are there, but they won't populate just because of the verbiage being used. So it always helps to just use one or two words. So for example, like broadband or housing or medical insurance. Right now it's been, as everyone's probably noticed, it's been really hot in Missouri the past week. So I'm curious about heat index. So I will enter the search terms heat and index into the search field, and I can either click enter or click the magnifying glass like a normal search, and it will immediately come up with 29 map layers related to my search. I see the map layer that I'm interested in, heat index, average days above 95 degrees by county, which was put out by the CDC, with the most recent data being 2019 to 2021. And as you'll notice, at the right-hand side of each layer, there's a little I button. That little I button is a layer info, and I can click on it, and it will open an information pane on the right-hand side of the screen. Now, this just provides a description of the data layer, tells you what it's measuring, gives you a release date. So again, this was released on December 2021. Tells you the release cycle, whether it's monthly or annually, or there are some layers that we have that update in real time. It tells the geographic unit. So when I look at this data, I know that I can view it for either the county level or census tract level. And then it also provides a description of the data source, which is helpful for folks who want to learn more about the source. We also have a link. So if you want to dig deeper on your own and go to the CDC website, you can access it from this pane. If I want to collapse this data pane, I can go to the top left here and click this little carrot-shaped tab that will collapse that. I can now go and check the box next to my data layer, and that will add it to the map. So as you can see, it's been added to the map. I can go to the legend in two different ways. When I click on the checkbox next to the layer, there's a box here that says view legend that populates. So I can click that, or I can go to the tile on the left-hand menu here that says legend and click that as well. That'll take me to my legend. And right now I'm looking at a large map of the state of Missouri and some of the surrounding areas. But for my purposes, I want to focus more on mid-Missouri. So I will go to the address or place bar down on the lower right-hand side of the screen here. Click that, and I will type Boone for Boone County. And as you see, Boone County for various states populate. And I'll click on the one for Missouri, and it'll automatically take me to that county. Now, if I want to adjust how far I'm zoomed in or zoomed out, you can see here on the right, there are plus and minus buttons. So I can click minus to bring myself out a little bit. I can also use the wheel on my mouse to have a little more control as I zoom in or zoom out and get a little more granular. And now for users of the old map room, you probably remember that you can add as many data layers as you'd like. So we can add additional data. So I'm going to go back to my tile here on the left-hand menu, click add data, and I'm going to click the X here to close out my previous search. And because I already have data related to heat index and number of days over 95 degrees per county on my map, I'm going to find related data for vulnerable populations. So my next search will be seniors living alone. So I'll put senior alone, and I will click search. And as you can see, 5 results populate. And we have households with seniors age 65 plus living alone by county. And it's for 2018 to 2022, which is the most recent ACS data. So I will check that. And just like before, the view legend box pops up. I can click that to go back to my legend, and now both layers are on my map. So one of the things you'll notice is that we can only see really the layer that's towards the top, and that's because these layers are ordered in such a way that the households with seniors age 65 plus is the second layer and thus beneath the first layer. So the way that we can change that is I can change the opacity of these layers. So whether the layer is transparent or opaque. And then I can also select the map button on each layer to determine whether it shows on the map or not. So I can click the map button to take the first layer off. I can click the map button to put the first layer back on. And then a third way that I can view the secondary layer is I can move it to become the first layer. So I can click this little directional button that you'll see with each layer, and that just allows you to click and toggle and change the arrangement of your layers. In addition to that, and in the legend, you can also change other features for each layer. So here we have a geography drop-down menu, and for the ACS data, I can change from county to census tract. I can then again reorder my layers, and I can do the same with the heat index data so that it matches. I can also reorder my layers again, and I'll change the data to a different time period. But for our purposes, it's probably best to keep it most recent, so I'll bring it back from 2018 to 2022. And then on certain layers, I can change the data from percent to total and vice versa. So you'll also notice that there is a little bar here at the top of the legend that says manage reference layers, and this is a nice feature of the new map room, and that'll allow me to click this toggle button and it'll add reference layers to my map. So I can click highways and have highways added to my map, and you'll see here state highways and interstates will populate on the map. I can unclick it so that they disappear. I can do the same with state boundaries. So if you look over towards St. Louis or Kansas City, the east or western side of the states, I can make the boundaries appear, disappear, or change their opacity. I can do the same with county boundaries and make them more pronounced by increasing their opacity. And I can do the same with boundaries of water or bodies of water. Once those manage reference layers are, your reference layers are the way you'd like them to be, you can click the toggle button again. That removes them from the legend, so it's not cluttered and you can see your map layers. So I can add additional layers if I like, and I think I'll add one more. So by clicking add data, I'll go back to the add data pane, and I will click cooling, because right now I'm interested in information about heat index, but also vulnerable populations, and then potentially cooling locations. So I'll search and you'll see two layers come up. The first one is of interest to me. It's all FEMA designated disaster shelters. So locations that could also serve as cooling centers should a heat wave come. And this is point data. And you'll see the view legend button comes up. I'll click the view legend button. And when I go back to the legend, you notice that this point data now populates on the map. And what's interesting is if I click the info button for this data layer, you'll see that the release cycle is daily. So this updates in nearly real time. And it's daily because the status of these locations changes. If you notice on my legend, it'll say that there's those that are open, closed, full, alert, or on standby. So as the status of these FEMA designated disaster shelters changes, the data on our map will change. So I could go on and I could add more data to the map, but rather than do that, we can use the data that we have and use some of the tools from the new map room to get more information from the map that we've already created. So what I'd like to do now is highlight some of those tools. And if you look on the left-hand menu, there's a tile that says tools. I'll click on that. And the first tool that we're going to look at is the select data tool. So this is the type of tool that will allow us to select data from certain geographies on our map and get data that's specific to that small area. So when I click select data, the select data tool opens. I'll make sure that my map layer that I'm looking at is the FEMA designated disaster shelters, and I will choose to select by radius first. So, sorry, I went too soon and started to work with the map before I actually selected the tool. So we'll go back to select radius. I'm going to keep my value at 10. And then I have units, so I can choose miles, meters, kilometers, feet, or yards. In this case, I'm going to keep this at miles and keep the value at 10. And I'm going to notice northwest of Columbia here, there is a census tract that's dark green with what appears to be very few FEMA designated disaster shelters. So that tells me that there's a high percentage of the population of households that have seniors age 65 and over living alone, and there aren't many designated disaster shelters. So I'm going to follow the instructions here to click a point on the map. I'll click, and then that automatically creates a radius that's 10 miles, and then there's automatically a selection result. So it's going to show me the designated disaster shelters that are within a 10-mile radius of that point. And here it's showing that there are 3, and I can get a little more granular with this data by clicking the View Data button. And what that does is it just opens a pane here on the right-hand side of the screen, which is going to show me each of those data points and give me some of the features or specifics about them. So here we see that within 10 miles of that point that I made, there are 3 potential shelters. There's St. Bonaventure, Marceline United Methodist, and First Baptist Church. It's going to give me the address. And then it's going to also tell me some other useful information, such as evacuation capacity. Now, if I want to take this information with me and work on it offline, I also have the option to export via CSV, so into an Excel spreadsheet. And that button is right here at the top. I can close this pane by clicking this little caret here on the upper left. And that option to export is also here in the selection results. If I want to get rid of these results, I can click Clear Result, and then I can choose another method of selecting data. So, for example, if I can select by polygon, and when I select that tool, it tells me instructions on how to use it. So click a point on the map to start drawing a polygon and double click to stop drawing. For this shape, I will focus on the more populated city of Columbia. So I'll click and drag until the city is largely surrounded. I'll double click, and then what the results will provide are all the FEMA designated disaster shelters that are within that polygon. So in this area, there are 37. Again, I can click View Data, and it's going to give me all those locations. So it's going to be churches as it was before, but also elementary schools. And then you'll see likely community centers, American Legion posts, Lions, Rotary Club, all those, anything that's been designated by FEMA as a potential disaster shelter. So I'll close this pane again, and then I'd like to move on to another tool. So what I'll do is go to the top of this menu, and it says Tool List. I'll click on that, and it'll take me back to my tool menu. So the next tool that we'll look at is Query Data. So this is useful because it allows us to ask questions of the data that we're looking at. I can change the layer to focus on households with seniors living alone. For the field, I will pick census tract because I want to find census tracts that meet my criteria. And for my criteria, I'm going to choose, not census tract. I'm looking at households with seniors age 65 plus and the percentage of households. So I'm going to choose that as my field. And I'm going to choose greater than as my operator. And what that'll do is it'll allow me to see census tracts with whatever percentage value I choose, whatever's greater than that, households with seniors age 65 plus living alone. So if I were to put in, for example, 15 and run this query, all of the census tracts that are highlighted and that populate are ones where the population, the households are in that given geography, 15% or more of them include seniors that are living alone. Sorry for the confusion there. And then once again with this tool, I can click View Data, and it'll give me similarly all of the data for the census tracts that were highlighted. So it's going to list each census tract. Some of these are in Illinois over the border, and it's going to say for each of those census tracts what percentage of households within that census tract have people age 65 or older living alone. So in this one, it's fairly high. It's 40%. It'll also give you the sheer number, the total number of those households, and then the total number of households in the area. And then some information related to margin of error as well. And again, with this tool, I can export this data via CSV, either here at the top, or again, through the export CSV button here at the bottom with the query results. I'll go up to the tool list and click on the button. That takes me back to my tool menu again. And the next tool that we'll look at is our mask tool. Now, this tool is really interesting because I think it gives the presenter or someone using this data the ability to really highlight certain areas, certain data for certain say again. Oh, heard some noise there in the background. But the mask tool, what it does, and I'll click on this to bring us to the mask tool menu. It's really interesting. It gives the presenter the ability to highlight a specific geography and separate that from the rest of the data so that it stands out. So in this case, I'll select county rather than state. And on the map, if I click on a particular county, it'll highlight and it'll be separated from the area around it. Now, what's nice about this tool is if I go and click on the legend tile here on the left, I'll go back to the legend and it's added as a layer. So what I can do is I can change the opacity of the mask layer so that Boone County either shows up in conjunction with the surrounding areas or have it so that it's totally separated. And if I'm done with this layer, one of the things that I can do is I can just go to the three dots here, click on these, and it gives me the option to remove the layer. That's also true of any map layers. So the designated disaster shelters layer, I can click on those three dots, and I also have that same ability to either remove the layer, or with the map layers, I can actually choose to copy the layer, which will duplicate it. So the next tool that I'd like to highlight, and what we'll do is click on the tools tile here on the left again, and then the tool list to go back to the tool main menu, is the draw graphics tool. Now, this is really interesting because it allows you to mark up your map and make drawings of different shapes and arrows and points in order to enhance whatever data you're trying to emphasize. So with points, you click point and it just gives you some instructions here. Click to add a point on the map. So I'll click here and it adds a red dot. If I want to change the color, I have a color menu here where I can choose various colors and I can add points of different colors. I can also add other shapes. So I can click rectangle, and here it tells me click and drag to draw a rectangle, release to stop drawing. And so I can put rectangles all over the map, wherever I choose. I can choose arrows to point or highlight certain areas. I can also make line segments, make a complete mess of my map. And then when I'm done, I can go to the top and there's a little eraser shape button here. I can click on that button and it'll ask me if I want to clear all my graphics. I can click yes, clear my graphics, or I can say, oh no, I've put way too much time into this creative pursuit. So I'll click cancel and continue with what I have. And if I choose to do that, I can also use this little back button here to remove pieces individually. And what it will do is it'll remove them in reverse order of which they were placed. So the last things that I drew were the lines. If I click this button, it will remove those lines. It'll then remove the arrows. It'll then remove the rectangles. And lastly, there's the points that are left. I can click the eraser here if I want to get rid of those and say, yes, clear my graphics, and everything is removed. So the next tool that I'd like to show you, if we go to the tool list button again, I can click this and go to the main menu, is the swipe layer. Now, the swipe layer is a really great way to compare two layers that you have on your map. So if I click swipe layer here, you'll see that it highlights two layers. I can change which layers are being examined. So for my first or top layer, I can change this to heat index. So looking at the census tracts with days by days over 95 degrees. And then I can keep my households with seniors age 65 and older living alone as the bottom layer. The top layer will show on the left, the bottom layer will show on the right. I can also change to a vertical swipe where I can compare the data vertically. I prefer the horizontal. But what's nice is you can then look at your map and you can compare the data in one layer with the data on another layer and look for areas where, maybe there's some reason for concern. Maybe there's an area that has an outsized or outstanding number of average days over 95 degrees and also an abundance of seniors living alone. So that might represent an area for focus, or there might be a more vulnerable population. So that can be a particularly useful tool. And I'll go back to the tool menu by clicking tool list at the top here. And sort of the last tool that I would like to highlight is one that's tends to be pretty highly used and is effective at pointing out vulnerable communities, and that's the vulnerable populations footprint. So I'll click that. And it'll automatically add it as a layer to my map. And just so I can better see it, what I'll do is I will use that little directional toggle button and move this layer up to the top of my map so that I can see it more clearly. And I can even go to some of the other layers and I can click the map button to turn those off so I can focus more on the vulnerable populations footprint layer. And what you'll see when you look at the map are 3 different colors on the map, orange, purple, and red. And so the census tracts that are highlighted in purple, right now, those are showing census tracts where greater than 25% of the population has less than a high school diploma. The areas highlighted in orange are census tracts where greater than 20% of the population is living at or below 100% of the poverty line. And the most interesting, or to me, the most consequential census tracts are the ones that we see here highlighted in red, which are the areas that fit both of those criteria. So those are going to be areas where the population is disadvantaged from both an educational and an economic standpoint. So they tend to be more economically vulnerable populations within those census tracts. And what's nice is that when I have this tool, if I zoom in on an area like Columbia, I may not see a lot of data given the current thresholds, but I can adjust those thresholds. So for population below poverty level, I can use this slider to make it so that it's census tracts with 10% or greater of the population living at or below 100% of the poverty line. And that will markedly change my map. And I can do the same thing with the populations with less than a high school diploma and bring that to 10% or greater. That should do the same to my map. And you'll notice that there are a lot more red areas that stand out. And it's just a good way of finding census tracts or finding communities that are more disadvantaged than other communities or other census tracts in the area. So that's basically a good rundown of the tools that the new map room offers. In addition to the tools, I would like to point out our export button here on the left-hand side of the screen. And if you look at the left-hand menu, there's a tile that says export. I can click export and it gives me the ability to export either the map or the map in the legend and in different formats. So landscape or portrait, and it gives you the dimensions as well. And then you can also choose your file format. So you're going to see commonly used files like PDF and your PNG and JPEG and GIF. But then also we have EPS and SVG files for those of you who are Adobe users. And in addition to exporting, you can also share. So there's a share tile here on the left-hand menu. If I click the share tile, you'll see numerous ways to share this map. So you can click share via email, and email will populate with a short link to the map. You can use social media, so you can share on Facebook, LinkedIn, the platform formerly known as Twitter. You can also copy the link, the short link here, and share it manually with your friends, coworkers, colleagues, whoever, and that can be via Teams chat, a Google Doc, a text, or however you choose to communicate. Lastly, what I'd like to point out on the left-hand side here is the feedback button. And we always encourage feedback. So if you click the tile here on the left-hand menu, the feedback pane will open and you can provide comments. And then optionally, you can provide an email address, which is helpful if, if we need more information from you to resolve an issue or a bug or something that's been identified, that can be helpful. And it's just kind of a reminder that feedback is always welcome and that these tools are incredibly robust and that we're more than happy to field questions from our users. So please don't hesitate to reach out.